Okay, so yes, we're going to start talking about group project 2. We'll also talk a little bit about what's going to happen for the remainder of group project 1. And we'll also do some preparation for lab 8, which is one of the types of labs where we're not going to have a part 1 and part 2. The plan right now is just to have one lab assignment. And this one is one of the labs which is different than the others. One thing that makes this one notably different is we will not be using PsyToolkit for lab 8. We will actually be using one of PsyToolkit's competitors. So I'll give more information about that later on. Start here talking about group project 1. So I have graded your first data file assignment. Most of them looked quite good. I think there was 1 or 2 groups where you were not calculating correct reaction time. You were just calculating reaction time, and that is something that you will want to correct. And I gave feedback. And so as of now, I gave feedback to the group member who turned in that assignment, and you should have had 1 member per group turning it in. The group member that turned it in should share that feedback with the rest of the group. I will have the GTA for this course will enter the grades for all of the group members. Right now, the grades are entered for just the 1 group member that turned them in. And in the near future, I'll have the GTA for this class enter the grades for all of the members of the group. And so make sure if I had feedback for your group regarding the first data file assignment, make sure that you incorporate those changes for the final data analysis and for the data collection assignment that you will be turning in here in the near future. I also want to point out that I offered extra credit for the control condition if you emailed me the link. I don't want to call out the group specifically, but I am still missing the link for 1 group in this class. I've gotten the link from 7. Yeah, well, actually, there might only be 7 groups now that I think about it. Yeah, I think there is only 7 groups, so maybe I'm not actually missing the group link from anyone. But if you haven't submitted the control condition, please, the link for group project 1, please make sure you send that. I'm offering extra credit, and I will add that extra credit point to your first half assignment. So regarding the first half assignment, I have started grading those. I've graded 1 of them. I'm giving pretty darn detailed feedback on those papers. And now you don't have to incorporate the feedback necessarily, because you're not going to turn in the first half again for a grade. Like, the first half will be part of the final assignment that you turn in for this, but I'm not going to. The first half is mostly your introduction. I'm not going to regrade the introduction when you turn in the second half assignment, but I'm giving you feedback because you will be writing a introduction again for group project 2. And I imagine that the feedback that I'm giving you for this group project will be beneficial to help you kind of strategize and to write appropriately for group project 2 for that writing assignment when you're writing an introduction there. So my goal, and I believe this is a very attainable goal, will be to have the remaining papers, I guess there's 6 more, graded this weekend. So yeah, you'll have the first half grades this weekend with feedback. It'll be a similar situation. The feedback will be provided. Actually, no, for the first half, I'm actually putting the feedback directly into the document, and then I will email it to probably the group member that turned it in, and then that group member could share it with the rest of the group. That's my plan right now, at least. And then, of course, everyone will get the same grade for what you turn in. And I do want to point out that as we wrap up group project 1, I am going to have an assignment where you guys talk about the contributions that everyone in your group made. And if it's very clear that there were members that were not contributing at all, that will be reflected. If it's unanimously agreed, then that will be taken into consideration when providing final grades for the various aspects of group project 1. So if you have been like the driving force in your group, I believe that will pay off for you in the end. Also, if you've been lazy in your group, there will be consequences for that as well. Okay, so I sent some emails, and I assume that you guys got them regarding data collection. So final data collection for group project 1. The due date was originally like October 4th. But obviously things have been slower than were expected for Sona system. And so basically I've had to extend the due date 2 weeks beyond what I was originally planning. Like for a while, I've had the due date Friday. I think I'm going to stay on this. I'm going to move it to Sunday night, basically at 11:59. I think that'll be the final due date for data collection. I don't believe I'm going to have to extend it beyond that because I've been sending emails to you guys recently asking if you want more of my students from 375 to be participants. And I don't believe I've gotten any new requests for that. But that offer still stands. There's a list of students that have said from my 375 class that want to participate. And if you would like them to participate, then please send me an email and we will arrange that. And if you send me an email and I haven't responded to you, then that means I missed it because I've tried to get back to all of the emails regarding this. So if you sent me an email saying you wanted a 375 participant, just forward that back to me or email it again, and I will not miss it this time, and we will make sure that you have participants. So the final due date is Sunday, 11:59. I believe I ended up saying that you can have up to now 4 friends and family members run for your study. And then the remaining 4 should either be people from Sona system or people from the 375 class. So at least half of your participants should be verified college students. The other half of the participants can be friends and family, and they may be college students or they might not be college students. Any questions or comments so far? Okay. Okay, so because we've been moving things back about 2 weeks for group project 1 because of those unforeseen circumstances regarding Sona system, we are in the situation in which we are going to have kind of 2 group projects going on simultaneously, which is not ideal. I tried to structure the course so that basically as we were wrapping up group project 1, that's when we would start group project 2, because I don't want to overwhelm you. But because of the 2-week delay, because of data collection running slower than I was expecting, we are going to have to start doing some things regarding group project 2 before we've actually finished group project 1. So we're going to have to kind of multitask here regarding these group projects. The stuff at the beginning regarding group project 2 is not going to be particularly hardcore yet, but we are going to have to start doing some of the planning phase for group project 2 is going to have to basically begin today, while we still have some significant things that we have to finish regarding group project 1. That's just going to have to be the way it is because we're 2 weeks behind schedule for group project 1. So some suggestions. We cannot complete group project 1 in its entirety yet because data collection isn't even done. And obviously if we can't do data collection, we can't analyze the data. And if you can't analyze the data, then we can't write the results section, which is one of the primary parts of the second half paper that you're going to write. So obviously you can't write the second half yet until data collection's done, which the plan for that is Sunday is when data collection should be done. However, I do think you can start writing the method section of the second half. Earlier in the semester, I did tell you about APA formatting. So that was an old lecture way at the beginning. You might want to check that out again. I did tell you how to format methods sections. You also should have some experience with this because of research methods, which you've taken before. But a suggestion, if you want to start getting an early start on the second half, my suggestion would be start writing the method section. And the 2 required subsections for this are participants and procedure. Now, regarding the second half, I will give you a formal assignment sheet for the second half, just like I did for the first. Well, not just like, but it will be similar. I gave you for the first half, I gave you pretty detailed instructions about what things to include in each section. I will give that for you for the second half as well. But you should already have a pretty good idea of how to write a method section. You've read several of them. You've talked about research methods. I've shown you earlier in the semester with the lecture, the type of things that are included in participants or in the method section. So you should be able to get a start on that. And that would be my suggestion if you want to get an early start in the second half paper, which will be due, I believe the tentative due date for the second half is November 1st. So that's a little over 2 weeks. Basically, I'm moving it back to the original due date was going to be, I believe, like this Sunday. And so I'm basically moving it 2 weeks into the future is when the second half is going to be due. So you should start writing the participants and procedures section if you can. And then one important thing about this, when we're writing the participants section, things have gotten a little bit complicated. So we need to compile all of the information about participant characteristics that we ran. So we don't have all of the information. For instance, I did not require you to ask participants their biological sex. I didn't ask you to ask them their age or any demographic information. So you don't have to include any of that stuff in your participant section. But I do want us to know, and I think we should all, the information that we should write about in the participant section is what percentage or how many of the participants came from 104 students in the SONA system. How many of the participants that we used were 375 students? How many of the participants that we ran were friends and family members? And I want, when we're writing the participants section, each group is going to write their own participant section, but I want us to, what those participant sections, I want them to be based on the aggregate, all of the participants that were run across all of the groups. So in order for us to do this, we need to I have created a Google Sheet, which is, you can click on it right here. It says we can compile aggregate all of the participant info. And let's see if we, here it is. So this is it. Participant 1 through 56 are shown here. Keep going down. And then these right here, if you have extra credit participants, would be the 101s through 156. And then the 201s through the 256, these would be friends and family. So all of these are not going to be filled. All of these are not going to be filled with information because a lot of these are going to be empty. There's like, over 100 participant IDs here, but we're only going to have probably around 60, maybe 70 if there's a lot of extra credit people run. So a lot of these are going to be empty, which is fine. But you need to find the corresponding participant ID that you ran for each participant. And then you need to indicate right here, if that participant was from SONA, give them a 1 right here. If not, give it a 0. If that participant was one of the 375 students, give them a 1 right here. Otherwise, give them a 0. If that person was a friend or family, give them a 1 right here. Otherwise, give them a 0. Any questions or comments about this, aggregating all of the participant info? You'll be using this. When this is all done, I will add up all of the people from SONA system, all the people from 375, all the people that were friends and family. And then when you're writing the participant section, you will say, we ran, total amount of participants was this many of them were from SONA, this many of them were from 375, this many of them were friends and family members of us, of the people taking this class. And that will be the main thing that you write about in the participant section. Is going to be pretty darn short for group project 1. Any questions or comments about that? All right, moving on. Okay, now because the data collection for group project 1, as I said, tentatively, I don't think it's tentative. I think it's basically the final due date is going to be Sunday at 11:59. This means that next week I will show you how to analyze the data, and then you will have to analyze the data yourselves, and then you'll have to eventually write it up in your results section. But before we can analyze the data, we need to do what we've been doing for all of the labs, which is we need to aggregate or compile all the data into a single Google Sheet, and then we'll copy and paste those data into SPSS when the statistical analysis will be performed. So that's what this is right here. The second link on this is the Google Sheet that we will be using. You can see we have the Mozart condition and the rain chimes condition up top. And then those are kind of subdivided into incongruent and congruent reaction time, incongruent, congruent reaction time. And then the same participant IDs that I showed you in the other one with the participant info Google Sheet, those same participant IDs appear here. And so fill in only those participant IDs that your group ran with reaction times. You should have 2 reaction times for each participant. If they were a Mozart participant, you'll have 2 reaction times here, and then this will be blank. If it was a rain chimes participant, these two will have numbers in them, but these two right here would be blank. And hopefully we're going to have approximately an equal number. We should have a very close to equal number of people in the Mozart condition and in the rain chimes condition. Please be, yeah, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
For the group project one, we ran our friends and family first, and so we used FF217 for the ID. Do you want us just to use, like, since we have like the columns for friends and family now, do you want us just to use the original number, which was 17?
217 is, no, so they would be 217 down here, right? I'm not for sure I understand your question, but if you call them FF217, then you would just put that participant's data right here. Does that suffice for what does that answer your question?
I guess we made them like extra credit then, because those big numbers are like the extra credit ones, I think.
That's actually not it. If you look, I don't know if I have the thing up right now. I don't think I have that group, but no, the extra credit ones were originally the 100s were originally the extra credit ones. I added the 200s later. But if a participant is both friends and family and an extra credit, then fill them in as 200 on here.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, yeah, I'll confirm with my group and make sure.
And for cases that are kind of ambiguous like that, I think it would be best if you sent me an email and I'll take those on a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
So the email, if there's questions about how you should classify a person, I guess now I think about it, there will be some people that are both friends and family and extra credit at the same time. And so that could be a confusing situation. So if that happens, then just send me an email.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Moving on. So yeah, we got to get those up there as soon as possible because we can't start data collection until everyone's data is up there. So really, these need to be filled in with data Sunday as well. Both of these Google Sheets should be filled up Sunday, because if they're not, then we can't start data analysis Monday. And the longer we wait for me to show you how to do the data analysis, the less time you're going to have to do it before we reach this deadline of November 1st, which is when the second half is going to be due. And I really don't want to have to extend that beyond that first day of November. So you all should be motivated so that we're not pinched for time to get the information into these Google Sheets. Sunday really is the last day to get that information. You should be able to start getting that information up there now. Okay, continuing on, that was group project 1 stuff. I do want to talk a little bit about group project 2. I'm going to compare it to group project 1 here on this first slide, and then I'm going to give you a little bit more information about what you're going to be doing for group project 2. And the reason I'm giving you this information is because you need to start thinking about what type of study you're going to do. Group project 2, you're going to be much more independent than you were for group project 1. Group project 1, I was giving you a lot of structure. Group project 2, you are kind of dictate what you do much more than in group project 1. In group project 1, I gave the study idea. In group project 2, you're going to have to come up with a study idea. I gave you in group project 1, I literally gave you a Google Drive folder that had all of the stimuli. But in group project 2, you're going to have to make the stimuli. In group project 1, I gave you most of the articles that you ended up using in group project 1, at least for the introduction. That's not going to be the case in group project 2. In group project 1, I gave you most of the code that you used. I made a video basically showing you all the code for the experimental condition. Really, all you had to do was tweak that code to make the control condition. So obviously in group project 2, all of these things that I basically did for you in group project 1, you're going to have to do in group project 2, mostly by yourself. Now, that's not to say I am more than willing to help. And I especially enjoy working on coding inside Toolkit and making stimuli and talking about study ideas. You'll probably have to do most of your article finding by yourself, though, unless you happen to do a topic that I'm particularly knowledgeable about. But so you'll be doing these things much more by yourself for group project 2 than you did for group project 1, although I am more than willing to help where I can for group project 2. For group project 1, each group only ran 8 participants. And the participants, it was supposed to be all Sona systems, but we ended up running some people from friends and family and some from my 375 class. That will not be the case for group project 2. Because Sona System has been kind of a bummer this semester, I'm going to majorly modify my original plans for group project 2. I told you a little bit about this last class, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it in the next slide. For group project 1, the statistical analysis that we're going to perform is going to be a mixed ANOVA, 2 by 2 factorial mixed ANOVA with these factors right here. And this will definitely not be the statistical analysis for group project 2, because I'm basically going to, I don't want to say completely outlaw between subjects variables, but I'm going to make it so that I doubt any group is going to choose a between subject variable. So I'm imagining that all of your variables, all of your factors will be within subjects for group project 2. So here, that was kind of reflecting on group project 1. Here is information regarding group project 2. I already kind of mentioned all these things. All of these things, which I basically did for you for group project 1, you're going to have to do by yourself for group project 2. For group project 2, you're going to need to do 30 participants. I wanted more. I believe originally I was going to have it where each group did like 50 participants, but Sona System's just not working out, so we're going to do 30. This is a huge modification compared to what's ever been done. The last 2 times I've taught this course, the group project 2, every participant was expected to be from Sona System. I'm going to completely reverse that because of how unreliable Sona System has been. None of the participants that you run for group project 2 are going to have to be from Sona System. Sona will be completely optional. So Sona is still a decent source. I noticed there's 2 people that signed up today for group project 1. So Sona will be optional. So what this means is that if you have, and I asked you about this and I got mostly positive feedback, you can have all 30 of your participants be friends and family. You'll have to specify in your eventual method section for group project 2 who your participants are, as far as like, were they friends and family? Were they Sona System? Was it a mixture of both? Either one is fine. And I suggest friends and family because that's the easiest thing to find. But I will say this, for the sake of scientific validity, I really hope that you guys are not like telling your friends and family what to do and like how to respond, because we don't want to taint the results. Me personally, I really like seeing the reality of a scientific finding, and I would hope that you guys would appreciate that as well. And so that if you're using your friends and family, you are using individuals that have not been biased by your previous conversations with them, or if they know the hypothesis of our study. So use friends and families, but use ones that you believe will give you, true data that aren't going to fudge it. Another option for group project 2 will be my 375 students. There currently is a queue of students. There's like 9 people, I think, last time I counted, who are just waiting to participate. We might use those up for group project 1, or they still might be left over for group project 2. There are students that were interested in the 2 points extra credit. So that's another option. If you need several of my 375 students though, give me advance notice, because then I can try and get more people to sign up for my 375 class, and we can get a bigger list of available students. So if you're thinking you're going to need a lot of 375 students, tell me again. I'll send another recruitment email and we can try and get a bigger list of students. And so this is what I was referring to in the last slide, because something you've probably learned before in research methods, between subjects factors, that's when people are in one group or the other. They're not in both conditions. Between subjects factors, you have to basically have more participants than you would if everything was a within subjects factor. So basically, if you have any between subjects factor at all, you're going to need 60 participants. And so I don't want to completely exclude the possibility if someone really wants to do a between subjects factor, but you're going to have to do double the amount of data collection for a between subject factor, because I want you to have some sort of statistical power. And with between subjects designs, you have to increase the subject size to have the same amount of statistical power as you would with a smaller sample size with a within subjects design. So I imagine what's going to happen is basically everyone's going to do within subjects designs only. I doubt anyone will do a between subjects design, but if you do, you're going to have double the participants, 60 instead of just 30. Any questions or comments here? I think that's, yeah. So I will say one more thing about, sorry, going back here, about group project 2. I'm going to require, unless you have special permission from me, I'm going to require the group project 2 that you use psy-toolkit, which I imagine most of you would choose that anyway because you've gotten pretty in-depth training at how to use psy-toolkit. So I'm going to require psy-toolkit for group project 2 unless you get special permission from me. So I'm not going to require it completely. If there's another program that you like better than psy-toolkit that somehow you've taught yourself or you learned from another instructor, I'm fine with that. But you will have to prove to me first that you know how to use it and that it's appropriate and that it'll be sufficient. You'll be able to finish the project using it. So you have to use psy-toolkit unless you have special permission from me, which would require at least an email, but maybe even a Zoom meeting with me for special permission. Okay, so there is an in-class assignment today. I have 2 little in-class assignments, and one of them involves coming up with study ideas. Where did I put that? Yeah. So the first one, in-class assignment 2 for today, is coming up with potential study ideas with your group. So usually for these in-class assignments, I make them do the next day at the end of the day. I'm going to give a little bit more time for this because I really want you can do this one by yourself if you want to, but really what I want is for you guys to have a meeting with your group. And I want you guys to brainstorm together. And I want you to come up for this first in-class assignment for today. You're going to come up with 3 study ideas. So some things about study ideas, some things to keep in mind. So here are some changes that I'm making. For instance, last year and the year before, I actually did not allow correlational designs, but we actually did more, lecture things on correlational designs. We did regression earlier in the semester. So I'm actually going to allow correlational designs for your group project if you would like. Or you can do a one-way design, or you can do a factorial design. These are really the 3 things that I think I'm kind of expecting to see. If you're going to do something other than this, then you need special permission. This includes I think every single study that we've talked about in this class can be classified as one-way, factorial, or correlational design. So I imagine whatever you would choose to do would be one of these. If it's something different than this somehow, then you would need special permission from me. We'd have to have a meeting and we'd have to talk about it to make sure it's feasible. But before, one-way designs are simpler than factorial designs. And before you just do a simple one-way design and leave it at that, you should be advised that part of the points you're going to get for group project 2 is based on the complexity of your design and the interestingness / originality of the research question. And so don't just choose a one-way design because it's easy, because if it's not interesting, if it's not original, if it's, it's one-way designs can be simple. And so if you will, I guess to be direct about this, if you choose a one-way design, you better make sure that it's an interesting or original research question, or you're going to lose some points. It's not going to be drastic amount of points, but one-way designs are inherently simpler than factorial designs. And so if you choose a very simple design, then you want to make up for it with interestingness and originality of the research question. So you might want to use, similarly with correlational designs, if you just do a simple correlational design with 2 variables. Let me read this question real quick. Should the question relate to a topic we discussed in class already? It does not have to. I think that's a good place to start, and I'm going to give you some specific suggestions for how you could come up with group projects based on what we've done in the labs already and what we did for group project 1. You don't have to use the topics that we've talked in class. You can use something that you learned in your social psych class or, a cognitive psychology class, whatever. You can take the knowledge that this is a capstone course, and really you're supposed to be applying everything that you've learned over the past few years for the second group project. So I want you to incorporate the things that I've taught you, which you find useful, and the things that your other instructors have taught you that you find useful. It doesn't have to be just stuff from this class, though I imagine there will be a good amount of people that choose stuff from this class, just because, for instance, if you do a modified version of the street task, you already have the code for that, and you wouldn't have to code the entire thing from scratch. So, and if you do some kind of a modification of the IAT, I can send you the implicit association test that I have, and instead of having to write the code from scratch, you can modify what already exists. So that's the reason why you would be, you might want to use the stuff that we've already done in class, that you will not be required to. So regarding correlational designs, they can be simple or complex too. Regression is obviously more complex especially if you do hierarchical regression where you're looking to see is this correlation still significant when we take the influence of another variable into consideration. Those are complicated. Those are more complex compared to a simple correlation design where you just have X variable and Y variable and you see if they correlate. I remember from when I taught stats last semester, they do a correlational assignment in most of the stats class. And one of the more common ideas that people have is they look at the correlation between, what was it? Now I'm having a hard time remembering it, but there's correlations between, I'm drawing a blank. But if you I'll just say this, if you do a simple correlation between X and Y variables, that's really simple. So if you're going to do a correlational study like that, you will lose points for it being an overly simple design unless the research question that you're asking is particularly interesting or original. So I'll just say in general, if you're going to choose a very simple design, meaning one-way design or correlational design, which is two variables, X and Y, then you're going to want to offset the simplicity of your design with making sure that the research question that you're asking is particularly interesting or original. It won't destroy your grade if it's not interesting or original, but I want to give the advantage to the students that choose a little bit more complex designs and the students that do interesting and original research questions. I want to give them the higher grades than people that choose the easy way without doing an original idea. Let's see. So yeah, there's kind of this relates to the question that was just asked. There's kind of two approaches that I see would fit for the way you come up with study IDs. These are definitely not, there are potentially other ways of coming up with study ideas. But one way you can kind of approach coming up with study ideas is just something that you're interested in. Maybe you've had a question from a different class you've always kind of just been interested in. Maybe you talk about that question and the other people in your group say, yeah, that is an interesting question. And it's one that we could potentially, solve using the tools that we've learned in this class, making studies on Sci Toolkit and then sending the links to people and then addressing them. And so, you start with a question. You would find, the literature that, the research literature that pertains to that question. And then you would make the stimuli and run the study. That's what I mean by working forward, starting with a question and then fleshing out the study ideas by finding the literature that exists. Another way that you could do this, though, and this is probably a good way to go, because if you do this, you're likely to have factorial designs, which is complex, which means that, you don't have to worry about things being too complex or, being too simple. Take something that we've done in this class, like group project 1, to remind you the factor, we basically combine two different existing paradigms that exist out there in psychology. The Stroop paradigm, which has existed for like 40 or 50 years. We just took that and we combined. So in that we have the factor of congruency, congruent and incongruent. And that's existed for a long time. And then we took another factor which exists, the Mozart effect factor. We had, the Mozart condition and the control condition, which is the rain chimes. We basically just we combined two factors from two different fields of psychology together to create a study, and it was a factorial design. And so you could do that. I don't want to give specific ideas, but that we've had several labs in this course, and we've also talked about several papers in this class. And one approach is taking one of the existing things that already exists in Sci Toolkit, the implicit association test, the Stroop test, the Riker-Wheeler, the word reading test where you have to pick the letter that appeared in the word. We could take those and then you could combine it with some other type of thing that, expose people to a certain type of sound and then see how that influences their performance on the Riker-Wheeler test, or show people pictures and then look at how that influences their performance on the implicit association test. And so you can just kind of combine the things that we already have with some other factor, which you've either learned about in this class or you've learned about from another class. And that's kind of a good way to go. And I say work backwards because in this case, you would kind of come up with the study idea first, or like the stimuli first, and then you would have to go back to the literature and figure out what question am I even answering? So instead of starting with the question and then finding the study, In this kind of approach, you kind of start with the study and then you backtrack and be like, what question am I answering with this study? And I think those are two perfectly valid ways of coming up with study ideas. And so these are just a couple suggestions. So yes, in classes, here's where I'll talk about the in-class assignments. Okay, so I want 3 study ideas per group Word document. For each study idea, I want you to specify the factors and the dependent variable for that study. So for instance, if you do the Stroop task, it's probably the dependent variable is going to be reaction time. Though you could do a Stroop task where the dependent variable is amount of corrects. You could do that, although reaction time is by far the more common dependent variable if you're doing the Stroop task. But I do want to be clear about this. I only want 1 dependent variable per study. So either reaction time or accuracy or probe tone rating, just choose 1 dependent variable and stick with that one from the beginning. But yeah, so when for each study idea, specify the factors and the 1 dependent variable that you'll use. So for correlational design, you don't usually use the terms factors and dependent variable. And for a correlational design, you usually would call them predictor and criterion variables or independent and dependent variables for a correlational design. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm giving you more time than I usually would for an in-class assignment because I want to give you guys times to meet as groups, which I know that takes some, you have to make sure your schedules kind of fit. Although you will have time today in class to do some of this if you want. So I'm gonna make it due Saturday night at 11:59. 3 potential study ideas specifying the factors and the dependent variable for each study idea on Microsoft Word document. It's in the in-class discussion activities folder on Blackboard. That's where you turn this in, due Saturday night at 11:59 p.m. You can do this by yourself if you just absolutely can't find time between now and Saturday to meet with your group to do this. You can do this by yourself, though I think it'll be more beneficial to your group project too if you work with your group. And so by group, I do mean the same group that you are using for group project 1, I think you should be using for group project 2. And then, okay, so here is now where we're talking about preparation for our lab that we're gonna do Friday, where the lab part of this class is we've done a lot of work, and the whole purpose of all the labs up to now have been basically to make it so that you could do group project 2. You needed to learn PsyToolkit so you could do group project 2. The labs that we're doing moving forward, I guess there's 3 that are scheduled still. And we're now starting to move, like the labs are kind of having a different purpose. They're not necessarily for helping you perform group project 2. Now they're trying to give you just more general skills and knowledge that could be useful to you, not just now, but maybe in the future. And so for this lab, you'll be using a competitor of PsyToolkit called Gorilla.sc. So Gorilla.sc is, I would say, more powerful than PsyToolkit. But the part that's unfortunate about it is that if you're going to run participants, if you send a link to some other participant, you have to pay Gorilla.sc for your data. So I didn't want to do that I didn't want to use this Gorilla.sc for group project 2 because I didn't want you to have to pay $1, which I think it's about $1 participant. I didn't want you to have to pay $30 to do group project 2, which is about how much it would cost. So we're going to learn how to code in Gorilla.sc, but you will most likely not be using this for your group project 2 because it would cost money to use. But arguably a more powerful platform than PsyToolkit, and it's something that might be useful to you later on if you ever have to do online research. So for this lab for Friday, we're going to do a hemifield word reading study. So it's similar to the Riker-Wheeler study, but if you recall for the Riker-Wheeler study that we did previously, 2 letters would appear on the screen and the participant's job was to type one of those 2 letters, and that was it. We're going to do a word reading study, but instead of it being like the Riker-Wheeler paradigm where you're just choosing one of the 2 letters, we're actually going to have the participants type in the entire word. And that sounds like an easy thing, but that's actually difficult for PsyToolkit to do. PsyToolkit is not good at having you, in the middle of the experiment, type in words and having that text appear on the screen so that the participant can read what they wrote. Gorilla.sc, on the other hand, can do that quite well. So we're gonna have a word reading study where words appear real quick on the screen, and we're gonna have, you're gonna code it, and you're gonna make it so that the participants will be able to actually type in the word that they saw real quickly on the screen, and then they can see the word they typed on the screen, and then they can press a button to get to the next trial. I'll provide the stimuli, but you'll have to code it. And I put codes in quotation marks there because Gorilla.sc doesn't actually use coding like SciToolkit did. Gorilla.sc is completely a graphic user interface. So it's all pointing and clicking of the mouse. There's no, I don't want to say it's like 95% pointing and clicking of the mouse, just a little bit of actual coding. And I'm not for sure that you'll actually be doing any of the, I don't think you'll be doing any actual coding for this lab. So I put code in parentheses. You'll be making the experiment work with Gorilla, but it's mostly using a GUI, a graphic user interface. So some things that you should do to prepare for this lab, you're going to need to go to gorilla.sc and create at least one login and password. So the login is an email address. Each one of you can create your own login and password, but what you'll be turning in will be for the people that are working in groups for Lab 8. You'll be turning in proof that you have successfully coded the one experiment that I'm going to have you code Friday. So all you need to finish this lab is one login and password per group. And you might want to create like a Gmail email address specifically so you can do this, because the way you log in is with an email address. You need to have an email address to log in. So one login per group will be necessary, but you can have multiple logins if you want. You know, each person in your group would have their own login as well, but you'll be only submitting information based on one of those logins. And then to get you so you can kind of get started learning about how this works, I have found a YouTube tutorial for gorilla.sc right here in the slides. And these are just 3 questions, which are basically just proving to me that you watched the tutorial and understand it at a basic level. And Friday, I'm going to go into more detail about how to actually do the coding, and then you're going to actually have to do the coding. But before I do that, I don't want you to be completely surprised by what you're going to be seeing. So I want you to watch this video so you're getting an introduction right here, basically the basics of how gorilla.sc works. So here are the questions, the 3 questions that you have to answer. I want you to do this. This is going to be due soon. This will be due tomorrow at 11:59 p.m. So that's all I have planned for today, I think. Yeah, that's it. But you definitely have some stuff that you could be doing right now with the remaining class time, and I suggest you use that. I'll be around my computer. I'll close down Zoom, and then I'll come right back into it if anyone wants to talk, but I'll also be checking my email very frequently for the next hour if anyone has questions or wants to meet with me. So I'll stop recording.